I never believed in God. As an experienced surgeon, I placed my faith firmly in science and reason. I had always dismissed religion as superstition, a crutch for the weak-minded. My life was devoted to medicine, the cold, hard facts, the anatomy, the biology, the chemistry of the human body. The brain was just an organ, nothing more. Consciousness? Just electrical signals, nothing divine. That was my reality. But as I lay there on the operating table, my own life, hanging by a thread after a massive cardiac arrest during a complex surgery, all that certainty began to crumble. I was fully aware, even in those final moments, hearing the frantic voices of my team around me, the beeping machines, the commands shouted, the desperate attempts to revive me. Yet, paradoxically, I felt utterly detached. No pain, no fear, only a strange, calm awareness. Then the darkness enveloped me, but it wasn't the darkness I expected. It was the opposite. Light, pure, radiant, and warm beyond anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the sterile, harsh light of an operating room, but a soft, comforting glow that seemed to fill every fiber of my being. The panic, the fear, the disbelief I had always carried began to melt away. I felt safe, loved, and welcomed. I thought, this can't be real. This is some hallucination, a trick of the dying brain. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize, this light was more real than anything I had ever seen. I was beginning a journey I never imagined possible, one that would shatter every conviction I held as an atheist doctor, and I was about to meet the most incredible presence of all, one that would change me forever. As the radiant light embraced me, I felt myself moving, not with my physical body, but as a consciousness, untethered from flesh and blood. Time seemed meaningless. There was no ticking clock, no rushing footsteps, no sounds from the hospital. Instead, there was an overwhelming silence, filled with a profound presence. It was as if I had slipped into another dimension, one beyond all scientific understanding. And then I saw him. At first, I was startled, not because I was afraid that emotion had vanished, but because the being before me radiated a love and peace so intense, so pure, that it defied every scientific explanation I had ever learned. It was not a vague, distant deity as some might imagine, but a tangible, radiant presence that seemed to look right into my soul. His eyes were kind, full of mercy, wisdom, and a depth of understanding that made me feel completely known. Every flaw, every doubt, every hidden wound laid bare without judgment. I expected condemnation for my disbelief, my skepticism, my relentless criticism of faith and religion. But instead, I was met with endless compassion. I wanted to speak, to question, to argue, the scientist in me still struggling to grasp this reality, but no words were necessary. His presence communicated everything without speech. It was love, the purest, most transformative love I had ever felt, reaching into places I didn't know needed healing. For the first time in my life, I understood that there was more than just neurons firing, more than the biological machinery I had dedicated my life to studying. There was a soul, a spirit, a divine essence, far beyond my comprehension. Tears welled up, not out of weakness, but from the profound revelation that I was not alone, that the universe was not cold or meaningless, that this being Jesus, though I had never called him that, had been waiting for me all along. I felt a gentle invitation, a beckoning to stay in that light, but also a call to return to live differently, to embrace a new truth that I could no longer deny. I was overwhelmed, humbled, and transformed. The atheist doctor was dying, but a new soul was awakening. The pull to remain in that indescribable light was immense, a warmth and peace unlike anything my skeptical mind had ever imagined possible. Yet, I sensed a tug, a gentle but firm call to return to the world I thought I understood so well. The moment to choose had come, to stay in this eternal embrace, or to return to a body that was broken and limited, to a life I had always viewed through the lens of cold logic and doubt. As I drifted back, consciousness returning to my failing heart and gasping lungs, a storm began raging inside me. The disbelief that had defined my life collided violently with the undeniable reality I had just experienced. How could I reconcile years of training, scientific evidence, and personal conviction with this vivid encounter? Was it a trick of the brain, a near-death hallucination, or something beyond the scope of medical science? I awoke on the operating table, gasping for air, surrounded by a team whose faces reflected relief and urgency. They had brought me back from the brink, but I was changed. The sterile white of the hospital walls now seemed cold and hollow compared to the vibrant, radiant world I had just left behind. Over the following days, as I recovered, the memories flooded my mind with relentless clarity, the light, the presence, the profound love, and acceptance. It was not a fleeting dream. It was etched deep into my soul. I found myself grappling with questions I had never dared to ask. Could faith be more than superstition? Was there truth in what I had always dismissed? Despite my scientific mind screaming for rational explanations, my heart whispered of something deeper, a spiritual reality that transcended my empirical understanding. I realized that healing myself would require more than physical recovery. I had to confront my skepticism, my pride, and the walls I had built to keep faith out. The atheist doctor was no longer who I was. A new journey had begun, one that would challenge every belief I held and redefine the meaning of life, death, and existence itself. It was a battle between reason and revelation, and I was determined to follow wherever this path led, no matter how unsettling or transformative. Returning to the life I once knew was harder than I anticipated. The hospital corridors felt suffocating, filled with sterile machines and hurried footsteps. But inside me, a profound transformation was taking place, one that no one around me could see. I was haunted by what I had experienced. And yet, the world I inhabited still demanded the cold, scientific mindset I had mastered over decades. The two realities clashed inside me, like titans. I tried to resume my work as a doctor, performing surgeries and consulting patients, but my hands trembled with the weight of new knowledge. How could I heal bodies without acknowledging the spirit? How could I continue to dismiss the profound encounter that had shattered my atheism? The hardest part was speaking about it. To my colleagues, friends, and family, I was expected to remain the rational, dispassionate scientist. When I attempted to share glimpses of my near-death experience, I was met with skepticism, ridicule, or silence. Many dismissed my story as an illusion or brain malfunction caused by lack of oxygen. I felt isolated, trapped between two worlds. Even worse was the inner turmoil. Doubts gnawed at me. Was I losing my mind? Was this new belief a weakness, a betrayal of everything I had built my life on? But the peace and love I had felt in that heavenly encounter refused to fade. It was not just a feeling. It was a deep knowing that defied explanation. I began to read and study with new eyes, not just medical journals, but spiritual texts, historical accounts, testimonies from others who had walked similar journeys. Slowly, I began to understand that faith and science need not be enemies, that the universe might be far more wondrous and mysterious than I had ever imagined. My heart grew heavy with a newfound responsibility. I had seen the light beyond death, and I could not keep silent. But sharing this truth meant risking my career, my reputation, even relationships. Could I find the courage to bridge the chasm between my past and this new reality? Could I become a messenger for a world that, until now, I had denied? This struggle became my daily battle, to reconcile the healer I was with the soul I had awakened. to live authentically in both worlds. The atheist doctor was dying, but the man reborn in that light was fighting to be heard. And I knew deep inside, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the very nature of existence itself. In the weeks and months following my return, my entire worldview unraveled and rebuilt itself in ways I could never have predicted. The cold certainties of my past life, so firmly grounded in empirical evidence, and skepticism scrumbled beneath the weight of the experience I had endured. I no longer saw life as a mere biological accident. I understood it as a sacred journey with purpose, meaning, and divine guidance. I found myself drawn to prayer and meditation, awkward and hesitant at first, but gradually feeling the presence I had encountered during those moments beyond death. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a spiritual dimension that coexisted with the physical world I had always trusted. This was not some fanciful delusion. It was a profound reality, accessible and transformative. My medical practice began to shift as well. I no longer viewed patients solely as bodies to be fixed, but as souls to be cared for, individuals with spiritual as well as physical needs. Compassion deepened in my heart in a way I had never known. I listened more, held hands, and prayed silently when the moment felt right. Many patients noticed the change. Some were puzzled, others deeply moved. I began to share my story more openly, not to convert or preach, but to offer hope to those who struggled with doubt, pain, or fear of death. I spoke at conferences, wrote articles bridging science and faith, and even joined support groups for people who had near-death experiences like mine. The reception was mixed, of course. Some embraced my testimony, finding in it a bridge between worlds. Others rejected it outright, clinging to their own beliefs or disbeliefs. But I no longer feared judgment or rejection. The love I had encountered had healed my deepest wounds and freed me from the chains of pride and skepticism. My purpose had changed. I was no longer just a doctor of bodies. I had become a healer of hearts, a witness to a truth far greater than myself. Every day was a gift, every breath a miracle. The atheist doctor had died on that operating table, but what rose in his place was a man transformed, filled with a new faith that gave meaning to life and hope beyond death. I now understood that true knowledge is not limited to what can be measured or observed, but includes the mysteries of the soul and spirit. And in that understanding, I found peace, a peace I had never known in all my years of studying medicine, a peace that would sustain me for the rest of my days. As my transformation deepened, the world around me grew increasingly challenging. Friends and colleagues, many of whom I had respected and worked alongside for years, struggled to understand or accept the profound change in me. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. The label atheist had defined me for so long. Now, revealing my near-death experience and newfound faith felt like betrayal to many. At medical conferences, I was often met with thinly veiled skepticism or outright dismissal when I spoke about the spiritual dimensions of healing. There's no scientific basis, they would say. This is anecdotal and unproven. Yet, I knew what I had experienced was real, more real than any MRI scan or lab test. It was difficult to bridge the chasm between the measurable and the immeasurable, between science and spirituality. I wrestled with doubt, not the doubt about the reality of the light or the presence I had seen, but doubt about whether I could withstand the professional and personal fallout from sharing my story. Would I lose my license, my reputation, my relationships? The fear of isolation was real and at times suffocating. But as the days passed, I learned the power of vulnerability. I realized that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it openly and honestly. I began to share my story with humility, acknowledging my past skepticism and the struggles I faced in reconciling my new faith with my scientific training. This authenticity began to resonate. I found small communities, patients, other medical professionals, even scientists who were curious and open. Some had their own unexplained experiences or yearnings for something beyond materialism. Together, we explored the intersection of faith and reason, the mysteries of consciousness, and the potential for healing that embraces both body and soul. I also encountered patients who had faced death themselves, whose stories echoed mine. Their courage, faith, and resilience inspired me daily. They reminded me that medicine is not just about prolonging life, but honoring the sacredness of the human spirit. Despite the opposition and challenges, my conviction grew stronger. I was no longer just a doctor performing surgeries. I was a witness to a deeper truth, called to serve with compassion, humility, and faith. My life's work had been reborn, and I embraced it with all the passion and dedication I had once reserved solely for science. This new path was not easy, but it was authentic, and for the first time, I felt truly whole. As my faith deepened, so too did my understanding of what it truly meant to heal. Medicine had always been about curing disease, repairing damage, and extending life. But now I realized healing was far more profound. It was about restoring the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. I began to see how often patients' suffering went beyond physical symptoms. The pain of loneliness, despair, loss, and hopelessness weighed heavily on them, invisible wounds that no prescription or surgery alone could mend. I started to incorporate prayer, listening, and spiritual support into my practice, often offering a quiet presence when words failed. One patient, an elderly man battling terminal cancer, taught me this lesson in humility and grace. Despite his prognosis, he radiated peace and acceptance. When I asked him about it, he spoke of his faith, how it gave him strength and hope beyond what medicine could offer. His courage inspired me to become not only a better doctor, but a better human being. In the hospital corridors, I noticed subtle shifts. Nurses, chaplains, and even some doctors began to reach out, curious about my experience and the changes in my approach. We formed informal support groups, blending science with spirituality to better serve our patients' needs. I also encountered resistance. Some colleagues warned me against blurring the lines between medicine and religion, fearing it might alienate patients or undermine scientific integrity. But I believe the two could coexist, not as enemies, but as partners in the quest for healing. Outside the hospital, I began writing about my journey, sharing my near-death experience and its impact on my practice. I hope to inspire others to see that faith and science need not be at odds, but together could offer a fuller understanding of human health. Slowly, doors opened. Invitations to speak at medical ethics, seminars, spiritual care workshops, and even some scientific conferences came my way. These forums became opportunities to challenge the rigid skepticism that had dominated my own thinking and to advocate for a more holistic approach to medicine. Each day, I witnessed miracles, not always the dramatic recoveries we read about, but small, profound moments of peace, understanding, and hope in patients' eyes. These were the true healing moments where body and soul found restoration. My journey from atheist surgeon to a doctor who embraced the divine was never about abandoning reason. It was about expanding it, recognizing that life, death, and healing hold mysteries that science alone cannot fully explain. In embracing this truth, I found not only my own salvation, but a renewed purpose to serve others in body, mind, and spirit. Years have passed since that fateful day on the operating table, when death pulled me into its dark embrace, and yet, paradoxically, into the light that changed everything. The atheist doctor I once was has long since passed away, replaced by a man transformed not just in belief, but in purpose, compassion, and understanding. My story has become more than just a personal testimony. It has become a mission. I have dedicated myself to bridging the often divided worlds of science and faith, showing that the quest for truth is not a battle, but a journey that invites openness, humility, and awe. I have witnessed the ripple effects of my transformation. Colleagues who once mocked have begun to question. Patients who once despaired have found hope. Families who felt lost have discovered peace. These small victories fuel my commitment to share the message that life is sacred, death is not the end, and love is the ultimate healer. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that the greatest discovery of all was not a scientific breakthrough or a medical advancement, it was the discovery of grace. The overwhelming, unearned, unmerited love that reached out to me in my darkest hour and carried me through death and back to life. I am humbled beyond words by that encounter, by the mercy shown to a skeptic, by the invitation to walk a path of faith and healing, and I am grateful for every day I am given to live out that calling. To those who doubt, I offer this. Openness to the mysteries beyond what we see is not weakness, it is strength. To those who fear death, I say, there is a light beyond the darkness, a peace that surpasses all understanding. And to those who seek meaning, I promise, you are not alone. My life's work continues, not in the pursuit of accolades or fame, but in the quiet moments of compassion, prayer, and service to others. The atheist doctor may have died on the operating table, but from that death arose a new life, one filled with hope, purpose, and the eternal truth of love. This is my story. This is my witness. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the gentle call of the light that changed everything waiting for you, too.